So a few weeks back, I did a video where I said that Nikki Haley and Joe Biden were our only hope, really, to keep democracy alive. And I had a comment on that video from somebody who tried to boil down the argument into me saying essentially "orange man bad" in their phrase. It's become a thing where people like to simplify things and make it seem like the arguments don't matter. They try to break them down, mostly because straw is cheap and it's easy to burn. But there's more to it than that. And I laid it out in a response to their comment, laying out some of the stuff that I'm opposed to and some of the stuff that I don't like about Trump and why he's a threat to democracy. But in this video, I want to talk a little bit more about that and specifically focusing on impeachment and some of the criminal charges and stuff like that. So, hey, bear with me. There'll be a puppy at the end of it, all right? All right, so let's start this video off by talking about some more recent events, all right? So, ever since 2020, when Joe Biden was elected president, Republicans have been looking for a way to impeach him. They said basically, ever since the impeachments of Trump, that impeachment was now open game and anybody could be impeached at any time, just for the hell of it because it's the opposite party, right? So they've been looking for stuff and they've been trying to dig stuff up. And they started with this whole thing. They had this whole idea of like this laptop that was supposedly dropped off by what wound up being Hunter Biden and to this repair shop in New York. And it turned out that was actually nothing. There was nothing there. Then there was this informant, this FBI informant, who had supposedly dropped a whole bunch of stuff about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden in this meeting with Burisma and Ukraine and this whole thing. Turned out that guy was lying and was pulling information from a Russian spy and lying to the FBI. He wound up getting arrested and indicted. So everything that the Republicans have tried to do, including pulling Hunter Biden into Congress in order to interrogate him for 6 hours or 8 hours or whatever it was, an entire day basically, and they came out of that with nothing as well. And it's getting to the point now where they've just been going after him. Now, Republicans have had the majority in the House since the 2022 midterm elections. And all you need to impeach a president is a simple majority. So if it's so easy to impeach somebody on political grounds and just because they were in the opposing party, then they should have already impeached him multiple times, right? Like, shouldn't Republicans have had several impeachments at this point if it's so easy to do? If a president doesn't need to have anything or done anything wrong to be impeached. And that kind of was the catalyst for what made me want to make this video. Because, see, there's been three presidents impeached in American history. The first one was Andrew Johnson in 1868. And Andrew Johnson was impeached because he tried to remove a more or less a member of the cabinet that he wasn't allowed to remove. He didn't just try to, he did remove following the Civil War. And this was a thing that Congress deemed as wrong. They impeached him, and he actually came within one vote of being removed in the Senate. So that was the closest anybody's ever come to being removed. The next president to be impeached was Bill Clinton, who, for the most part, the reason for his impeachment kind of fell onto lying to Congress, more or less. Very oversimplified, but that's what it kind of boils down to. Then comes Donald Trump. He's the third president to be impeached, and he holds the record for being impeached twice. Most impeached president ever. So at least he has that record, right? But he was impeached the first time because he tried to extort a foreign country into giving him information on his political rival coming up to an election. Basically, it was a quid pro quo situation with the leader of Ukraine, President Vladimir Zelensky, who's currently still the president as they're being attacked by Russia. And he basically said, hey, we know you got we would give you some weapons and some money and that kind of stuff to help with your defense. And we'd love to keep giving you that, but we're going to need something in return, right? And that's the way that the mafia works, right? The mafia comes in and they say, it'd be a shame if something were to happen to your establishment here. Not saying that we're going to do anything, but, we could help protect it. And that's kind of what was going on there, right? So that's why he was impeached the first time. And Republicans bitched and moaned and complained. Democrats, by the way, bitched and moaned and complained as well when Clinton was impeached because they didn't think that it was right to impeach a president for lying to Congress either. So this isn't a partisan issue, okay? This isn't where one party's worse than the other. They both have their ways of bitching about who's being impeached and why, okay? And then in 2021, after the January 6th riots and insurrection, attempted overthrow of the government that was orchestrated by Donald Trump as he stood in front of the crowd and was like, hey, go down there and, convince Mike Pence to vote for, to overturn these results. All of that stuff that he did wound up getting him impeached again. And again, it was mostly along party lines, although you did have a couple of Republicans that actually had the balls to stand up and say, yeah, you know what? This was actually really wrong. All of that, and by the way, Richard Nixon, you might think, wasn't he impeached? Richard Nixon resigned because he was actually going to be, based on the numbers that they had, the first president to be impeached and removed. They had the numbers to impeach and remove him. He resigned before they could impeach him. So that all brings us to more present day type of things. Because Donald Trump, for all of his faults, has also committed a lot of crimes. Now, it's easy to sit back and say, well, no, you can indict people just for the hell of it. You can, just because you don't like somebody, you can indict them and throw them in jail. And that's complete bullshit. You can't just indict people and throw them in jail. There are people in this country who are accused of crimes, who are arrested just for the hell of it, but they're typically lower class and typically fall along certain racial lines and boundaries. We're not going to go into that too much in this particular video, but it's something I wanted to mention because there are people that face an unequal justice system in this country. And typically, when you're rich, you wind up not facing quite as many penalties, which is how Donald Trump has gotten away with what he's gotten away with to this point in his career. Where Donald Trump made the mistake and where most richer people that they don't get into politics typically as a rich person because they get rich doing a lot of sleazy type of things. And if they were to actually become president or were to actually get a position of power, there's a likelihood that they would actually have to pay for some of those things. Donald Trump, he didn't care. He just went ahead and did it, right? So he's being indicted. He's being charged with a whole bunch of things. He's been found guilty of things in civil cases, right? And he's been ordered to pay hundreds of millions of dollars for those civil cases, including things like lying and inflating his business value in New York. And you might say, well, that's not such a big deal, right? Everybody, especially the richer you are, you're going to inflate your values a little bit. He inflated his values a ton. It would be very similar to me going to the bank and saying, hey, I want to get a loan, and I'm going to put up some collateral for this loan. That collateral is going to be my car. Oh, how much is my car worth? Oh, my car's worth $200,000. And yeah, I've got an attorney that's already signed off on this. This is my appraiser. And then the bank taking my word for it and giving me a $200,000 loan when my car is only worth $20,000, say. That's the kind of inflation we're talking about, lying to get that. And even if you repay it, that's still fraud and it's still not allowed. It's not legal in any sense because somebody could go in and inflate the value of their assets and get a huge loan and then not pay that loan back. And it would cost the bank potentially hundreds of millions or more of dollars. So that's why that's illegal. And that's why he wound up having to pay that back. So there he's lying and he's inflating things. He's making himself seem like he's making more than he is. That's bad enough as it is. But realistically, I mean, a lot of politicians, a lot of people that get into politics are kind of sleazy and they tend to lie and inflate themselves and inflate their own egos and that kind of stuff. And if that was the only thing that he'd ever done, it's not really that uncommon, honestly. The extent of it is, but it's still... He'd have to pay the civil penalties, but he would still be able to, wouldn't be that big of a deal. But then considering the way that he treats women and the charges that he's faced for that and the things that he's had to pay for that on the civil side, and then there's the criminal charges. And I just want to talk about the criminal charges for a second because the criminal charges that he's facing typically involve election interference, campaign finance type of stuff, which you might think campaign finance, that's not a big deal. It is a big deal because when you donate to a campaign, you expect that money to be used for certain reasons to help a candidate get elected. You don't just give money to somebody. If you want to give money to somebody for the hell of it, give money to me on my Patreon. Don't go donate to a political campaign. But you expect your money, and that for that trust to be there has to be certain laws in place to ensure that money is being used properly. And so Donald Trump, and he's not the first person, he won't be the last person to abuse campaign finance, but that's what he's being accused of criminally in one case. There's a bunch of other cases, but one of the big ones I want to focus on really is the January 6th stuff that's all tied into the insurrection, right? Because he is being charged criminally, like a lot of other people, with taking part in an insurrection against the United States government. And as part of that, Donald Trump has stood up and his lawyers have come forward and they've said, look, he can't be charged with this because he was president at the time, and anything you do as president is seen as an official act and you can't be charged criminally for it. And if you can't see where that could be a problem, strap in, all right? Because one of the things that was asked by the D.C. Circuit of Appeals when this whole thing came up, the appeals court, the judges said, hey, all right, asking Trump's lawyers, if, let's say, a president of the United States decided that he wanted to use the Secret Service or the CIA or FBI or whatever to take out a political rival, and let's just say he wanted to order a hit on that political rival and have them silenced, basically. The kind of stuff that Russia does and Vladimir Putin just did to, I can't think of the guy's name. My mind just blanked out. I'll put it up on the screen. But, the kind of stuff that happens in dictatorships, right? And Trump's attorneys said, yeah, he could do that. And the only way he could be charged is if he was impeached and removed by the House and the Senate. Now, this is contrary to way back when, during one of the impeachment trials, where Donald Trump's attorneys at that time made the case in an impeachment trial that the president shouldn't be impeached for high crimes, for actual criminal stuff, because, once they get out of office, then they can be criminally charged. So now we're going back and forth, right? And by the way, you can find all of this stuff. It's on the record. It's real stuff that people have said tied to Trump. You can hear the audio. You can see the people talking about this kind of stuff, right? So, yeah, he's made the case that he, as president, should be able to do whatever the hell he pleases and get away with it. And that's where we're at. We're at a situation where we have somebody running for president who actually thinks that the president of the United States is above the law. Now, let that sink in for just a minute, because if you think you're above the law, then that means you can essentially do anything you want. That means essentially you could, like they said, have a political rival assassinated. You could take out people you don't like. You could throw people in jail you don't like. And that right there is the main issue, the biggest issue for me, that Donald Trump would have the audacity to think that he is above the law as president of the United States, and that the crimes he committed before and after being president of the United States, well, those should all just be ignored. It shouldn't be a big deal. Nobody should care about those things. And he will stand up in front of crowds and claim that the only reason people are coming after him is because of who he is and because he's running for president. Now, what does that mean? So let's say I wanted to commit a crime. Let's say I wanted to rob a bank. I could essentially, according in Donald Trump's logic, I could go rob the bank. As long as I'm running for president first, I can then argue in court that, hey, they're just coming after me because, I'm running for president. It's a political hit job. And claiming that things were done above board and everything was great. He tried to claim after the civil fraud trial for the tax evasion and issues in New York, he tried to say that, I ran a perfect business. They're finding me for running a perfect business. That would be akin to I'm driving down the road, I'm going 20 miles over the speed limit, and the police officer pulls me over, and he gives me a ticket, and I go to court, and I argue I was driving perfectly. I was perfectly driving down the road. It was a perfect straight line, and the cop pulled me over and ticketed me anyways. I'm being ticketed for driving perfect. And that logic doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. When you are in an office in any office in the United States, especially at a federal level, if you are a representative in the House of Representatives, if you are a senator, if you are the president of the United States, or a judge on the bench in the Supreme Court, you have a higher bar that you're supposed to be living up to. And the problem is, over the past 30 or 40 years especially, that bar has gotten lower and lower and lower gradually. And we still have some people that try to live up to that bar. They're not perfect, all right? No politician is perfect. There's still politicians at the end of the day. But there's always been that bar, right? There's always been a line that a lot of people would walk up to, but they just wouldn't cross. And especially since 2016, that line has basically been erased. People don't worry about walking up to it and not crossing it anymore. It just doesn't exist. And you have more and more and more people that will sit in there. They'll get elected to office by saying that, the election is rigged unless I win. If I win, well, we overcame the rigged election. But if I lose, that means it was rigged. That logic doesn't make sense. It does not. You cannot sit there and tell me honestly that if you win, it's not rigged, or you overcame it being rigged. But if you lose, it's because it was rigged. That doesn't work. You can't. There is no universe in which that makes sense. Just like there's no universe in which it makes sense that the federal government is good enough to make up fake charges and evidence against somebody, but they're stupid enough to be found out about all of that stuff. That's why conspiracy theories don't work typically, because typically with a lot of conspiracy theories, there's the idea of, the government is this conniving secret force that's going to come up with all of this stuff, but it lets clues out. The whole QAnon thing that went on a few years ago with QAnon and Trump and all that kind of shit that was going on. The secret guy in there, and he's leaking little things and letting us know what's going on, and it was all bullshit. People want explanations for things. I don't blame somebody for wanting an explanation and for feeling like, because that's what conspiracy theories are at the end of the day. They're an explanation. Oftentimes, they're a more fun explanation. We love movies and we love stories and that kind of stuff. And conspiracy theories wind up typically being a more interesting explanation than the mundane daily stuff. It's more fun to think that the government might have all kinds of, crazy things going on inside of it than just to think that there's a bunch of inept people that don't know what they're doing. And, basically, the people that are running the government, they're no different than you or I. They just happen to be in that position, in that office. They are trying to figure it out day to day, just like we are. You can go to school, you can learn these things, you can go to law school if you want, without running for an office. And you can learn about all of this stuff, and they know the exact same amount as you. And sure, there's classified information that's brought up, and there's stuff like that they have to use for day to day to figure things out. But at the end of the day, they're going off of the same information, more or less. They're going off of the same historical facts, and they don't know any more than you or I do. They're not above anybody else. Being president of the United States or being a member of the House of Representatives or a senator doesn't make these people smarter or better than anybody. It just means that they're in a position of power. And we have to understand that. We have to realize that, all of this stuff that these people will stand up and say, they want to be the persecuted ones, because honestly, the people that truly are held down, the people that truly are in a position where we don't have power, is the average person. Those of us that are sitting back on a daily basis and just trying to make ends meet, trying to pay the bills, trying to do what's right on a day-to-day basis, going to work, getting the kids to school, all of the normal stuff that we're trying to do, we're the ones that are actually the ones held down. So when somebody stands up in a political sphere and in a position of power and says, I understand you. I understand what it means to be held back. You want to stand with that person. You want to feel like that person is going to fight for you. They're going to champion you. Because you don't have a voice and maybe they can be your voice. And oftentimes that's not honestly the case. Oftentimes it's just that those people are just like you and I, and all they're trying to do, they're trying to keep their job. They're trying to stay in power. And they're going to say whatever they have to say to convince you to keep letting them do the job even when they're inept at it. It's something I want to get into at some point in the future, and other videos I'm working on and thinking about is, Democrats talk all the time, a big game. They talk about things, Roe versus Wade got overthrown and Democrats threw up their hands and said, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. The same people that were saying, we know this is going to happen, that had all three branches of government, or not all three branches, had the House and the Senate and the White House for 2 years, 2 full years, Democrats from 2020 to 2022 could have passed a law nationally to make abortion legal on a national scale, didn't do it. And that's what happens. Democrats get into power. They promise the moon to get into power. And then they get in power and they stop doing anything at all. Republicans tell you exactly what they want to do. They get elected, screw up the system, fall out of power. Democrats come in, don't do anything at all, sit around, occasionally get things passed, the Affordable Care Act and stuff like that are imperfect bills, but the Democrats don't do the stuff that they promise that they're going to do, which is why they keep losing elections. And that's a topic for another video. I don't want to get too carried away on it, but it's just, it goes to show that these people, they aren't any better than you or I, and we need to stop looking at them as some kind of gods on the hill, because they aren't. They're average people who happen to be in a position of power. So that's all I got for this one. I know it might be a little bit controversial. I hope it's not too controversial, because I hope that most people that are going to watch this can understand where I'm coming from and understand that, it's not as simple as black and white, red versus blue. It's something where we have to start looking at these things a little bit more clearly and understanding that nobody we don't live in Soviet Russia yet. We don't live in communist China yet. We live in a country where you can still run for office and you aren't being persecuted for your political views yet. So that's all I got. I'll throw the patron names up here again. I think I got it on the right side this time. You can go over there to help support the channel. If you enjoy what you see, if you watch a few videos and you want to help support me, Patreon's a great way to do it. Obviously, liking and subscribing here on YouTube goes a long way, because people are weird, and the bigger the subscriber count, the more quality they think that the channel is. So I need more subscribers so people think that my channel's good. More watch time, all that kind of stuff. Go watch my other stuff. I've got obviously these kind of videos I'm trying to do on a regular basis. I've got some other passion projects that I'd like to do down the road. It just depends on how things go. And honestly, more patrons, more subscribers, more watch time, all of that stuff adds up to put me in a position where I can do some of those bigger passion projects that I'd like to do. Some of the stuff I used to do on my channel. If you look back at the channel and you like some of the older stuff, that's the kind of stuff I'd like to do, especially the Legends and Tales stuff. So that's all I got for this one. I want to thank you all for watching. I'll throw a puppy up at the end of the video here as promised. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.